always loved taking late night walks. There's something about the stillness that makes everything feel simpler. I've been a welder for over 40 years now, and live alone on a large farm with just my dog, Bosley. The house is too big for one person, but I never had the heart to downsize after my wife, Maria, passed away. My kids moved out years ago, and since cancer took her, it's just been me and Bosley. One night, after a long day in the shop, I decided to take a walk. My property is large, so a single loop is usually enough to satisfy my craving. The air was cool, and Bosley trotted happily beside me. Sometimes I think he likes me more than I like him. I've walked that loop hundreds of times, but as I was heading back to the house, something caught my eye. I glanced up at the second story window, the one from our old bedroom. For a split second, I thought I saw something move. I froze, staring up. There was no reason anyone should be in there. I hadn't stepped foot in that room for years. I felt my blood boil at the thought of a stranger in my house. I wouldn't stand for that. I rushed inside, my heart racing, and ran upstairs. The room was empty, just as I'd left it, with no sign of anything out of place. I searched everywhere but found nothing. Yes, I was freaked out, but I felt more anger than fear. I didn't take this lightly. I figured I must have imagined it. I stood there for a while, feeling foolish, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there. The next night, I woke up to Bosley growling. He's a good dog, never barks unless there's a reason. I sat up, listening, and then I heard creaking coming from upstairs. It could have just been the old house settling, but my mind immediately jumped to footsteps from directly above me. You can guess which room that is. I thought about grabbing my hunting rifle from downstairs, but decided against it. I felt confident I could handle whatever was up there in a confrontation. I grabbed my flashlight and went to check again. The room was just as I'd left it, untouched. My anger was shifting to anxiety. Something felt off in the house. The following night, I came downstairs to find the kitchen lights on. I knew I had turned them off before bed. I never leave lights on. There was no doubt anymore someone was in my house. Panic set in. I called the police, telling them I thought someone might be sneaking around. They came, searched the house from top to bottom, but found nothing. They were nice about it, telling me to call again if I needed them, but I could tell they didn't believe me. The next night was the worst. I couldn't sleep at all. I decided to go upstairs and check the bedroom again. I'm not sure why, maybe I thought it would ease my mind. But when I opened the door, I froze. Clothes were scattered all over the floor, Maria's clothes. I had packed them away after she died, and now they were everywhere. This wasn't something that just happened randomly. Then I saw her, a woman standing in the doorway, just staring at me. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I knew she wasn't Maria. She was too short. I didn't know who she was, but she definitely didn't belong there. I had never felt such fear in my life. Without thinking, I charged at her. She turned and ran down the stairs and out the front door. By the time I got outside, she was gone. I searched the property with Bosley, but there was no trace of her. I didn't sleep that night, and for months after, I was on edge, convinced I heard footsteps upstairs. Every little noise set me off. I kept my rifle next to my bed, terrified I'd need to use it. One night, every sound put me on high alert. I thought about calling my brother to come stay with me, but I didn't want to do that. I was raised to handle things on my own, so that's what I did. But the nightmare continued. One evening, while sitting in the living room, I noticed a figure standing in the yard, staring straight at me through the window. It was her again. My heart felt like it stopped. I grabbed my hunting rifle and rushed outside, Bosley right behind me. She was still there, just a silhouette in the moonlight, watching me. I fired a few warning shots into the air, hoping to scare her off, and that was enough to make her turn and run into the darkness. But it didn't make me feel any better. I was being tormented by a stranger who was probably homeless. I couldn't understand why this was happening to me. I stood there for a long time, waiting to see if she'd come back, but she never did. I haven't seen her since, but I know it's only a matter of time. I'm fully prepared to defend myself, but living in this constant state of anxiety isn't sustainable. I work for a catering service, which means I'm often on the road late at night, hauling stuff in this massive truck the company makes me drive. It's not the worst job, but the hours are terrible, and it's not what I envisioned for my life. By the time I get home, I'm either so wired from caffeine that I can't sleep, or I crash the moment I hit the bed and sleep for 12 hours. One night I was driving home around 2 a.m. It felt good to be in my own car again. As I approached my house, I realized I'd had one too many Red Bulls and wouldn't be able to sleep. I hadn't eaten in hours and was starving. There's a McDonald's right off the highway, about 10 minutes from my house. It's usually my go-to for late night snacks since it's so convenient. I'm not someone who gorges on fast food, but I sometimes get a weird craving that only a handful of fries can satisfy. It's open 24/7, and I thought some comfort food would be the perfect way to wind down. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but it was definitely after 2 by the time I pulled into the drive-thru. A few cars were ahead of me, which surprised me. This McDonald's wasn't typically busy at that hour. As I waited impatiently, I started to zone out, wondering what was taking so long. That's when I noticed something odd and old, beat-up Volkswagen with tinted windows backed into a spot in the far corner of the lot. Since the McDonald's was only taking drive-thru orders at this hour, it didn't make sense for a car to be parked there. There were reserved spots for employees on the other side, so it couldn't have been one of them. I figured maybe someone was just eating in their car, which I'd done myself from time to time, so I couldn't judge. Still, it was an unusual sight. I got my food and started driving away. I didn't want to go home just yet, but sitting in my car idling felt pointless. I started brainstorming good spots to eat my food. I live in a pretty lush area, so there are plenty of options, but I didn't want to waste time considering how late it was. There's a large nature preserve just down the street from my house, situated on a mountain and essentially a massive forest. The highlight is a scenic lookout point at the peak with a view of the city. There's a road that loops around the preserve, leading to the peak, which is great during the day. After the preserve closes though, cars can't access it, but it's still a convenient path to the lookout without having to hike through the woods. I used to visit that spot often with friends in high school. It was our go-to for hanging out outdoors. We'd talk, smoke, or just enjoy the view. I hadn't been there in a while because I was always busy working, so I figured it would provide a much-needed dose of nostalgia. When I arrived at the preserve's parking area, it was completely empty. I call it a parking area because it's not a traditional lot with marked spaces. It's just a large patch of gravel off one of the roads bordering the preserve. Since the actual preserve was closed, I knew I had to walk all the way up to the lookout spot. Before I even turned off the engine, I noticed headlights pulling into the lot. That was unsettling. Who else would be here at 2 a.m.? I quickly realized it was that same Volkswagen from the McDonald's parking lot. I was certain of it. I parked a bit farther away and cut the engine, feeling unease wash over me. What were the chances of that happening? Had they followed me? My window was partially rolled down, and from what I could tell, there was no music coming from that car, or at least none I could hear. After a minute of nothing happening, my fear started to fade. They were probably just out for fresh air or a smoke. It's a popular spot for that kind of thing. Still, I felt weirded out by the timing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, even though I told myself it was just a strange coincidence. I sat there for a minute debating whether to just go home. I didn't want to leave, but I also didn't want to be alone. I picked up my phone and FaceTimed a close friend who lived nearby. I figured if he didn't answer, I'd just eat in the car and head home. To my surprise, he was awake. He said he'd been working on a paper. I convinced him to come by for a bit, and he agreed to be there in 10 minutes. While I waited, I kept an eye on the Volkswagen. It still hadn't moved. I tried to shake off my paranoia, but when Sebastian finally pulled into the lot, I felt a lot better. We both got out of our cars and started walking up the path. Before the parking area fully disappeared from view, I glanced back and saw all 4 doors of the Volkswagen swing open at once. 4 guys stepped out, standing there for a few seconds, just looking at each other. They weren't talking, just silently glancing around. It was unsettling. I nudged Sebastian, who noticed what I was looking at. Before they could see us, we continued walking up the path, putting the lot out of sight. Alarm bells were going off in my head, but Sebastian seemed unconcerned. He suggested they were just going out for a smoke. By the time we reached the top, The city view helped distract me. We always sat on a little rock wall meant to keep people from wandering off the edge of the mountain. We sat there eating and chatting like old times, but that nice feeling didn't last long. We soon heard voices and laughter approaching. Turning around, we saw three guys walking toward us, sharing what looked like a blunt. They seemed friendly enough, which calmed my nerves a bit. Instead of finding their own spot, though, they walked right up to us as if they wanted to chat. The guy holding the blunt was covered in tattoos and had a nose ring, making him look pretty intimidating. He flashed a half smile and asked if we wanted to smoke. We both declined, and one of the other guys laughed and called us lame. My curiosity got the better of me, so I blurted out a question about what they were doing at McDonald's. The guy with the blunt instantly dropped his smile and narrowed his eyes, caught off guard by my question. His friends mirrored the reaction, staring at us with cold expressions. An uncomfortable silence stretched on, and then I remembered there had been 4 guys in that car, not 3. One of them was missing. I was ready to run, and I knew Sebastian felt the same. Finally, the ringleader told us he worked nights and had just gotten off. He pulled his hoodie up to reveal a McDonald's uniform, as if he knew we wouldn't believe him otherwise. He claimed he came to the spot every day after work to smoke with friends. While that calmed me a bit, something felt terribly off. I could tell Sebastian felt the same way. We decided it was time to leave. As we started down the path, Sebastian suddenly pointed into the trees. Following his gaze, I spotted the 4th guy half hidden in the darkness, holding something I couldn't make out. My heart raced when he noticed us looking. He began to move toward us. That's when we ran. We bolted down the path, glancing back to see him chasing us with the other 3 guys close behind. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I could hear their footsteps getting closer but didn't dare look back again. We finally reached the parking lot, jumped into our cars, and sped away. As I drove off, I could see those guys rushing to get into their car. I didn't feel comfortable driving straight home, fearing I'd lead them right to my house. I called Sebastian, and we agreed to meet back up on his street. We had a decent head start, and I didn't think we were followed, but I wasn't taking any chances. When we met up, we were still in shock over what had just happened. I didn't know if they were trying to rob us or something worse. Sebastian showed me his phone, revealing he had taken a picture of them while they weren't looking. He sent it to me, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. Since I had the next day off, I convinced Sebastian to come back with me to the McDonald's so we could at least report the incident. The next day, we approached a younger guy, hoping he'd listen to us. We showed him the picture and explained what happened, and his eyes widened in shock. He shared something that sounded straight out of a horror movie. That guy's girlfriend had also worked at that McDonald's and had dumped him a few months prior. He didn't handle it well. He began harassing her at work and stalking her after shifts. Naturally, he got fired, but that didn't stop him. The police got involved and a restraining order was issued. However, he was violating it by camping out in the parking lot. Sebastian and I were horrified. I had no idea why he chose to follow me, but it was clear he was unstable. I just hoped the police would catch him there, as that would finally put him in trouble. Forgive me if I don't remember every detail of the story. It happened quite a while ago. I grew up in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, where not much goes on, so finding things to do can be tough. In high school, a few friends and I would sneak into and explore old, abandoned buildings. That was our idea of fun. I didn't realize how popular urban exploration was until years later. There were plenty of people who enjoyed exploring these kinds of places. One abandoned church we visited a couple of times was in Narberth, and I still remember the exact address, 198 Elmwood Avenue. It was creepy, but became our go-to spot for late-night thrills. One fall evening, we decided to hit the church and drink a little inside. It was chilly, and the air had that crisp bite. There were 6 of us: me, Luna, Gina, Johnny, Max, and Ally. The church was surrounded by an 8-foot chain-link fence we had to climb to get in. All the doors were boarded up, so we always entered through a side window. Once inside, the first thing you noticed was the floor, or lack thereof. The entire first floor was just dirt. It looked like someone had ripped out the floorboards years ago, leaving only a hole in the center that led down to a set of concrete stairs. That's where we always ended up, the basement. It had 3 rooms, but only one had a door, the other 2 just had door frames. We first went into the large room, which held nothing but some old furniture, broken chairs, and a busted couch. I remember having to shush Johnny multiple times because he was a lightweight and the little bit of alcohol he had made him loud and antsy. Being in a big group made me feel safer. We laughed and drank, possibly with music playing from a speaker, though I don't quite remember. Out of nowhere, a door slammed. I literally jumped, it was that loud. We froze, exchanging concerned glances. At first, I thought one of us had accidentally closed it, but no one was near the door. Almost immediately, Luna, Gina, and Johnny bolted up the stairs, leaving me, Max, and Ali behind. We were the fearless ones and weren't ready to leave just yet. My heart was racing, but I wasn't going to let fear win. Max and Ali seemed to feel the same. After a few moments of silence, we decided to investigate the door that had slammed shut. We crept over to open it, revealing a small room. The first thing I saw was a dresser with a cracked mirror on top smeared with red stains. At first I thought it was old paint, but as I got closer I realized with horror that it wasn't completely dry. The stains still had a sticky sheen, suggesting they hadn't been there long. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up, and doubts crept in about staying any longer. It felt like someone or something had recently been in that room. Then I saw an old photo on the dresser, a black and white picture of a woman in a wedding dress. She was smiling, but there was something unsettling about it. I backed away, and just as I turned, we heard another noise, not from the door, but from one of the other rooms. It came from the very room we had just been in. That's when Max and Ali decided they'd had enough. I wasn't going to argue with them. We grabbed our stuff and sprinted out as fast as we could. When we climbed back over the fence and hit the pavement, none of us spoke. After jumping the fence, I turned around and swore I saw the silhouette of a person standing in the open window. I still hope that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but I'll never know for sure. My friends and I never returned to that church together for the rest of our friendship. I did go back alone eventually, but by then it had been completely demolished. I still have no idea what we encountered that night, but I'm glad my friends were with me. If I'd been alone, I might have doubted.